Yeah, let's go now to Senator Claire Chandler, who's again shown strong moral clarity, talking about where all of this is coming from. Claire, always great to see you. Thanks for coming on a Sunday morning. You've pointed the finger. You've seen those shocking scenes in Sydney. We had jet skiers, we had motorbikes, all with Palestinian flags tearing around the place. You've made the point, you've written in The Spectator Australia this week, very clearly pointing the finger at Iran. Tell us about it, Senator.
Well, thanks once again for having me on the show this morning. And absolutely, I think that people need to understand that it is the Islamic Republic of Iran regime that has been largely responsible for spreading terror throughout the world and particularly throughout the Middle East, and funding these groups like Hamas, like Hezbollah, that are now having such an impact in the area. And I think that risk has been very obvious to us in the West for a long time. But the reality is that the way we've all chosen to deal with this regime has clearly fallen short of deterring them from their behaviour at all. I've been talking about this issue for more than 12 months now, the need for our government here in Australia to take a stronger stance on Iran, and it hasn't happened yet. And now I fear, looking at what is playing out in the Middle East, potentially it's too late to take that strong stance.
Rita.
And we're seeing there's this Islamist ideology tolerated, sometimes even celebrated in the West. There does seem to be this bizarre alliance between the left and Islamists. They don't share many values, but they share a common enemy, being conservatives. Tell me about that dynamic, because it's evident not just in Australia, but throughout the West.
It certainly is an interesting dynamic, and I, remember from my own days in university politics, seeing that alignment, particularly on the left side of politics, and we've seen a lot of that playing out around the world and in Australia, particularly since the October 7 attacks. And I think that is incredibly disappointing. And the best way to push back against that, I think, is to do what Peter Dutton has done and condemn these clearly anti-Semitic actions, these anti-Semitic protests that we've been seeing across the country. And I think it's really disappointing that here in Australia, some of our leaders, including our Prime Minister, as you were saying at the start of the show, they don't seem to be comfortable clearly labelling this for what it is, which is the worst anti-Semitism that our Jewish community here in Australia has had to experience in our lifetimes.
James.
Claire, you've been very forward-looking on Iran, and I think probably bailed the cat on this for a lot of people in Australia before they realised what a big problem it was. We have seen out of the United States increasing reports that Iran has a very strong influence peddling, if not influence buying operation involving people in the Biden administration. How have we seen any of that play out in Australia? Has Iran been trying to affect Australian diplomacy as well as part of the shift that started bizarrely under Barack Obama to reorientate the centers of power in the Middle East towards Tehran?
Well, we certainly know that the IRI regime has been engaging in foreign interference in this country. The Home Affairs Minister, Claire O'Neill, was very clear about that at the start of the year when she talked about an example of foreign interference in a speech that she gave at the ANU. But what's been frustrating since then is that the government hasn't been anywhere near so forward-leaning in talking about the broader risks that we know exist within the Australian community, and particularly within the Iranian diaspora. This is a wonderful community of people in this country who feel that they have been under threat from a foreign regime, from the Iranian regime back at home, and they feel like the government hasn't listened to them. So I think that's very disappointing. And when you look at the fact that our government has taken this sort of softly approach to dealing with Iran over the last 12 months, perhaps it's no surprise that we're now in a situation where, they're also not calling out, anti-Semitism when we're seeing it here in our community.
But it's worse than that, Claire, because as you point out in your article, a lot of this has got to do with money. The Iranians spend, $100 million a year, which they give to the Palestinians. But wait for it, so do we. Not that amount, but we give an awful lot of money, thanks to Penny Wong. We've increased the amount of money we're handing to Gaza, to Hamas, supposedly for humanitarian aid. The reality is that Hamas controls every single cent, every penny that goes in and out of Gaza. So therefore, we are literally directly handing our taxpayer dollars, hundreds, millions of dollars, directly to Hamas via UNRWA and all the rest of it. They're the hands that it will end up in, whether it's aid or anything else. What can we do? This amount of money going into UNRWA was increased by Penny Wong. What do you say to that?
Well, this is certainly something that my colleagues and I in the Senate have pursued at Senate estimates and have asked the Foreign Affairs Minister about and DFAT about. And I think it goes to the broader issue that I've been talking about in terms of Iran for quite some time, but it applies to a number of bad faith operators across the board, is that we need our government to be very clear and very transparent about these relationships. And I think in some instances, particularly in the case of Iran, they need to be reducing those relationships to the absolute bare minimum of what they should be for us to be able to, deal with these countries if and when we have to. But again, this is something that the Iranian diaspora in Australia has been calling for quite some time, is for reducing those diplomatic relationships to a point where they are just at the minimum of what they need to be, because if we don't do that, then we are to an extent legitimising this very bad behaviour. And
Claire, just quickly, Q&A tomorrow. The ABC have got Francesca Albanese, no relationship to our own Prime Minister. She works for the UN. She'll be on Q&A tomorrow. She's basically saying, Israel's got to stop having a war with Gaza and let's have peace, beautiful kumbaya between Hamas and Israel. Alex Rivkin, friend of this show, who's come out and made the very strong comment that, maybe Francesca Albanese wouldn't be making such comments had her family been murdered, butchered, raped, mutilated, dismembered, etc. by Hamas. What do you make of the ABC? The public tax, again, our money going to the ABC, and they're basically allowing someone like Francesca Albanese to promote what is viewed by certainly people like Alex Rivkin as a very anti-Semitic position.
Oh, look, I think that some of the ABC's coverage since the 7th of October has left a lot to be desired. I don't think that's a groundbreaking statement by any means. And I know that many of your colleagues at Sky News have been very vocal in that criticism. But in terms of Ms Albanese, I certainly hope that if she's going to go on Q&A tomorrow night, then she will also be making it abundantly clear that Israel has a right to defend itself, and Israel has a right to push back against the dreadful, dreadful terrorist attacks that we have seen against them by Hamas. I'd be surprised if she said that, but that's what she should be saying.